Welcome back, everyone, to Neuroalchemy, the brain body healing podcast. This is the space where science meets soul, where we slow conversations down enough to understand what's happening inside the human system, and where healing is explored as a multidimensional journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. I'm a functional and integrative medicine practitioner, previously a speech language pathologist, and much of my work centers on helping people reconnect the dots between their brain, their nervous system, emotional experience, identity, and meaning. One of the intentions of this podcast is to create clarity because when experiences feel intense, complex, or hard to name, clarity creates safety, you guys. And when the nervous system feels safe, it becomes possible to stay present with transformation rather than being overwhelmed by it. And before we begin, a gentle note for our listeners. Today's conversation includes themes of trauma, identity shifts, and spiritual awakening. If anything feels activating, you're always welcome to pause, take a breath, and return at your own pace. Today, I am joined by Kerry, is it Blaser?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Kerry's work lives at the intersection of psychology, mysticism, and neuroscience. My favorite place to be, exploring how experiences of pain, awakening, and identity transformation shape our relationship with ourselves. Her journey includes what she describes as crossing a threshold between survival and expansion, and returning with a deeper awareness of self consciousness and feminine identity. Her memoir, My Inner Heroine, traces that movement from breakdown into remembrance. Kerry, we are so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for what an amazing introduction. I'm so excited to have our conversation today.
I love that so much. Before we begin, I always like to start with just a gentle arrival check in. How are you arriving today? And that could be physically, emotionally, energetically, or spiritually as we step into this conversation.
Very expansive. I've let go of everything. I'm about to sell my condo and I'm about to launch my podcast, like out with the old, open the door to the new, and I'm ready to go.
Oh, that is so perfect. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And just a reminder to all of our listeners out there today, however you're showing up is enough. Remind yourself of that. However you are right now is perfect the way you are. Before we go deeper, I'd love to ground out a few terms just so our listeners feel oriented in the space. We're going to touch on some concepts like awakening and mysticism and consciousness. Those can feel a little abstract if we don't know what they mean. So we're going to define them in a more human way. Harry, when you use the word awakening, what does that mean in your lived experience?
Is transforming my emotional wounds into personal wisdom. I spent 35 years with debilitating lower back pain when I didn't understand that my womb was screaming at me to heal from my childhood trauma. And why was it screaming at me? Because there's tons of wisdom stored inside those wounds. So for me, it was awakening to the wisdom that's already in my soul and my heart.
That was a really beautiful way to define that. So thank you. I appreciate that. You also talked a little bit about mysticism. For someone who's never explored that term, how can you describe that in an accessible way?
Well, I'll use Rumi as an example. He's a 13th century Sufi mystic and says some very amazing things. And so for me, mysticism is the feminine, it's the wisdom, it's a perfect counterbalance to the masculine, the knowledge. So Rumi has amazing quotes like, you have to break your heart to open your heart because the wound is where the light shines for healing purposes. That's self awareness. Or what is it? What you seek seeks you. That's quantum physics. So let's say that in my soul, I'm moving at 40 hertz, and that is selfishness. Well, when my 40 hertz moves, that naturally moves 40 hertz in other people's souls that I'm interacting with. What you seek seeks you. And that's how we see ourselves. So one of my pieces of wisdom is the universe is a mirror. And that's like the mysticism. Here's the wisdom. The universe is a mirror showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self improvement. Knowledge says, like the science of it says, that we attract what we are through energetic resonance, meaning a vibrational match. And there's physics experiments showing how that's true. So the mysticism is the feminine, but it's born of the same truth as the masculine. Like a universal truth is shown in both wisdom and knowledge. And what I had to learn is that when something's true, it's true in multiple places.
I don't know about you, but this conversation just gets me so excited. It's so juicy. You know what I mean? Like that's
Love
where
it.
life is, right? That's who we are. Who we are is that, right? I just
Yeah.
get so excited about it. One more term is self-love. This word gets used often, but in your work, what does self-love actually look like in practice? Not just conceptually.
Right. The capacity to self reflect, to acknowledge one's, challenges and one's capabilities, healthy diet, healthy exercise, permission to rest, permission to sleep. Does not mean, well, oh, self love, I'm on vacation all the time. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a secure attachment to self and processes that daily processes like a gratitude practice that help you have a secure attachment to yourself every day, that you know how to process your emotional wounds, you know how to surf the waves of life and to be have a kind of emotional awareness and a healthy emotional intimacy with self. You're emotionally mature. So that's what I mean.
For those of us meeting you for the first time, myself included, we'd love to hear more about your story. Who were you before this shift?
Wow. Well, I was a full blown like feminist. I voted liberal my whole life. I was born in Arizona. We lived in Europe for a few years, but moved to Southern California when I was 5. And so up until 2024 was the first time I ever voted a Republican. So I was full blown, oh yeah, get your degree, get your career, have kids too. Like woman just does everything, you know, not understanding that I didn't have healthy boundaries with self, that the expectation that I should be able to work 40, 50 hours a week, come home, take care of kids, also have time to take care of myself, take care of my husband. I mean, I'm like 3 or 4 people right there, right? But that's what was taught to me. I was born in 1970. My parents got divorced in 1976. I grew up in Westlake Village, California. That's right next to Malibu, extremely wealthy area. My dad had money, but I had a job when I was 12 years old. I started a 6-year career, hot dog on a stick, when I was 14. But I was making double minimum wage when I graduated high school, and I went to San Luis Obispo to go to community college there so I could work at the hot dog on a stick there. And I bought my own car, which I needed to do. There wasn't money coming elsewhere. So who was Carrie, before the last 10 years when I started to heal? I was very much in my masculine, very much didn't know how to have healthy relationships, like didn't know how to be healthy in my femininity, like forgiveness, compassion, nurturing. I was providing and protecting for myself. My mom was an alcoholic, my dad was a workaholic, and because I didn't understand that I caused all of my problems, I didn't understand that I'm the reason that I attract in challenges into my life to see myself. Like I didn't know the universe is a mirror. And so I blamed everybody else for my problems, but only when I took accountability for my problems starting 10 years ago did I finally start to change my relationship dynamics. I let, my anxiety went away, my depression went away, but it took me acknowledging that I was creating all of my own problems. And that was hard to do.
What brought you to that threshold moment and what began to open on the other side of that?
So, in my early 40s, I had 4 to 7 migraines per week. I was on trazodone and Klonopin and Soma. Like, it was gnarly, gnarly, gnarly. Like, I couldn't go in the sun for 2 years because I would just get so overwhelmed. I had to get purple tinted glasses because that helped stop I was just so sensitive. So both me and my youngest daughter bought those glasses, and that cut down our migraines. It was enabled us to go outside. That was like kind of the beginning of the turning point. But then on my 45th birthday, June 25th, my mom passed away. And the hospital called me early in the morning. And then I went right back to sleep, and she came to me in a dream, and she looked beautiful. I hate makeup, but she loved to do her hair and the makeup, like we're opposites like that. And she looked gorgeous, and she thanked me for taking care of her in her final days and honoring her wishes and getting her to see all of her family, which I did. And then when I woke up, my intuition guided me to one, accept my psychic gifts, accept my intuition. And then step two was, after I accept it, was it's time to heal from my childhood trauma, because up until that point, my heart was in my mom's heart. She was the matriarch, but she is an alcoholic, and it wasn't in her soul's plan to heal in her lifetime. And so, but it's in my soul's plan to heal. Okay. I'm like, oh, I'm matriarch now. Remember, I tried to start drinking in my early 40s, but I quickly got hives on my face. Like, my body really protected me from that. I was like, oh, okay, fine, be that way. Be right. Be right. And so I started going to shamans and healers, and that's what I knew I needed. And I started to learn how to dive into my emotional pain, because at that point, no one had ever taught me how to process my emotions. My mom, was a band-aid with the alcohol. She never learned. My dad was anxious and yelling and screaming when things didn't work out, so he never learned. So I
Mhm.
had to, reparent myself. I had to teach myself how to acknowledge that I have a challenge and that I don't know what's going on, and to ask myself what the problem is and listen to myself and then turn it into wisdom. So here's kind of an example of how I learned how to do that, like the first time. So about 2 years after my mom passed away, I had an argument with my youngest daughter, and I have three children. And she was about 16 at the time, and I was wrong, and I needed to apologize. Okay, like, okay, you're faced with a teenager. This is how we learn how to, so with the challenges, like, I'm human, I'm wrong too, right? And so I get off the phone, and I'm like, oh, what? And I had finally learned to ask myself what the problem is. So I asked myself, I said, okay, well, why can't I apologize? And this was what I heard, in quotes, you, as in me, believe that if you apologize to your loved ones, they will leave you. I'm like, well, that's not that's not logical, but that's how, what I learned over time, that's how wounds show up in our subconscious. That's our emotional pain kind of lying to us, but it's also driving our behavior unknowingly, lack of awareness, right? Lack of consciousness. This is what we're talking about. So when you have a lot of unhealed childhood trauma like I did, I was tons of lack of awareness of why had failures in my relationships and jobs and with my kids, and I was unaware of myself. So this is an example of how I became aware. I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, if I apologize to my loved ones, then they'll want to stay. I'm like, okay. So I turned that wound into wisdom, called my daughter back, apologized, and then, like, the apologies just come out of me, no problem. So once I had kind of acknowledged my emotional block, my emotional wound, and then I had let go of it, then I don't have that problem anymore. And that's kind of the first example of how I learned how to do that.
You've described a version of yourself as Carrie 2.0. What changed internally?
Oh, okay. So Carrie 2.0. In 2015, my mom passed away on my birthday. The youngest daughter. She's the one that kicks my butt every time. The youngest one. Like, oh my gosh, she gets me. Okay. So in April of 2019, almost, I would say, as April 4th, it was almost exactly 7 years ago. I went to a therapy session with my youngest daughter and my ex-husband. She had developed an eating disorder. And we get in a therapy session, and she had learned that eating disorders are a maternal wound. So she had learned to blame the mother. Now, I'm not saying that I was perfect. Obviously, I wasn't. I hadn't healed my childhood trauma, but because I hadn't healed, I attracted in a husband who also had not healed, right? We attract what we are so we can see ourselves, right? So unhealed attracts unhealed. So he had his problems too. Anyway, she blamed me, he blamed me, the therapist blamed me, and I'm fighting, like, the therapy. But on the way home, my worldview got really dark. And when I got home, My brain told me that my children will be better off with a dead mother than a live one. And I had recently refilled all my medications. I took like 120 Klonopin, about 60 Trazodone. Like, I don't know how I lived. I really don't. I took about 50 Soma, some Ambien, and I walked upstairs and I just went right to sleep. I let go. But why was I on all that medication? Because I didn't know how to let go of myself, of my problems and process them through. But that's how done I was. I was just done. That's how done I needed to be. So the next morning, my older daughter came to get me to go visit my younger daughter again. And so she found me and saved me and took me to the hospital. And then after I woke up after being intubated for 3 days, and of course my older daughter was there, had just arrived and was like looking at me this close. And then I woke up right in her eyes and our eyes met. And then they sent me to the psych ward. And that's really when Carrie 2.0 came out. And so here's an example of how the universe is a mirror, showing us ourselves in every moment. I super connected to an 18-year-old girl there, and my daughters were like 18 and 16 at the time. Her mother had passed away when she was 11. She had been raped like I had been raped,
Mhm.
and she had a serious eating disorder. It's just this is how we see ourselves. So this is why we attract what we are. So we have opportunities to go, hey, I need to improve. And so Carrie 2.0 came out where Carrie the healer came out. So it was the last night and we were in the same room and she had walked into the other room and I'm standing there and her mom's soul came through to me with a message for her, which included her childhood nickname that we had never discussed. So I went and gave her the message and told her the childhood nickname and her mouth's on the floor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then in the middle of the night, I wasn't sleeping that well because I still, I hadn't healed yet, right? I had hang on to so much emotional pain from my childhood trauma. But her mom came through to me again and wanted advice on how to interact with her daughter's soul in a way that helps her daughter because she's so afraid. So I guided her and I said, as long as your intent is love, it's soul to soul, then that's all you need, right? So she woke up the next morning and she had not had hunger cues in 3 years. Because when you have an eating disorder and you stop eating, your body gets on board with that and stops asking for food. And so she woke up with massive hunger cues and ate a full breakfast. I was like, I'm a healer, but now I'm in a psych ward and I just attempted suicide but I'm Carrie 2.0 and now what, right? And that was 7 years ago. But that's what I needed to see myself. That's what I needed to acknowledge how much pain I was in. But I had to start learning how to surf the waves of life before I could go that deeply into my pain. So when you start to surf, you start on the 1 foot wave. So what did I have first? I had the lesson about that my subconscious was lying to me that if I apologize, my loved ones will leave me. And then I turn that wound, that lie into wisdom that if I apologize, my loved ones will want to stay. And so then, oh, okay, now I'm more confident. I can go more into my pain. And so then 4 years into healing, I attempted suicide. But then after that, that's when I'm like, not again. Pulled out all my self belief, all my self confidence. And I did several medicine journeys, which helped me a lot. And then I started attracting men into my life, and they were huge and significant mirrors to my pain. Because if I'm flirting with a guy at yoga for a period of a couple months, he's not asking me out, then maybe I got something to work on. And that was definitely.
What stands out in these threshold experiences is that they're not just psychological shifts, right? They're full system experiences. The nervous system, identity, and perception, they all reorganize all at once. How did your nervous system experience that transition? Did it feel like collapse, clarity, or something else entirely?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad I got us to the guys because I have a great example for that. So the first guy, it was really intense, but the first time we had a longer conversation, it's like I pull was my when my lower back pain went away. So we had this conversation at yoga, and I always used to leave yoga early, but I knew, slowly but surely I'll be able to stay longer, and I would get longer and longer before my lower back would be like, yeah, no, you're done, Carrie. And so we had this great conversation, like, engaged my femininity. I was a great counterbalance. I didn't, there was tension, right? And so then the yoga instructor asked, "Well, what do you want to get out of the yoga today?" I'm like, "Heal my lower back pain." I did the whole class and the lower back pain was gone. And it's in my book. Tim in my book came up to me afterwards and I'm like, my lower back pain is gone. We had this great conversation, but I had attracted him in. I could get that far. No, I get a date. Like, no, I didn't get a date. I didn't go on a date with any of these guys because I wasn't ready and they weren't it. But my lower back pain went away. It's like, whoa. So then that gave me a lot more freedom. I started exercising more and going on more hikes. And then about 5 months later, Tim and I got in a big fight. There was a big fight. He told me never to speak to him again. And that was summer of 2021. So only 5 years ago. I gave myself permission to rest at 51 years old. I mean, that's how much I was constantly running myself into the ground. I mean, that's what I was taught: workaholic father, alcoholic mother. I didn't know how to regulate myself. All I knew how to do was do more. Just do more. Oh, you're not happy? Do more. Do more, do more, do more, do more. That was do more, as if that was going to solve things. But that summer's when I finally learned that doing less action, and I had to surrender to myself. So I gave myself permission to surrender to myself. And this is when I found that I had fear all men in my subconscious because I had run on so much anxiety my whole life, like sweating my whole life, running around my whole life, like constantly not knowing what. And I thought it was just legitimate to be fearful of everything and going around. And I just thought that's how life was. So when I saw that inside myself, I turned that into men protect me. Sure, some men are scary, but in general, men protect women. And I went to see my oldest daughter, and we would spend every weekend at markets because she had her own jewelry business. So we were in public every weekend together. And by this point, she's 19, 20 years old. So I was very, very well aware of how anxious mom is in public. Right when I walked up to her booth, "Mom, what's different? What happened? Mom, what'd you do?" I told her, I said, I found it in my heart that I have a wound, or my soul, fear all men, and I change it to men protect me. And I walked around, I was in public, like it felt good. I wasn't scared. I mean, it was like a whole new world for me. And that's one example of it changing the world as an inside job. So I wasn't fearful of men anymore because I changed something inside of me. And so I wasn't, I stopped attracting those fearful experiences into my life. And it was, that was just life changing for me because I just thought it was true that I should be this fearful of men. That's just an objective truth, right? No. Mm-mm. That was my past screaming at me to remember itself. And I finally learned how.
Let's talk a little bit more about the role of pain in that process. What did your experience of pain reveal about your feminine identity, your voice, or your lineage?
Wow, that's a great question. I say the most of my pain was screaming at me from my womb. And I've learned that the structure of the womb, like physiologically, mirrors the structure of the throat. And the vagus nerve connects the womb to the throat. Communication is feminine. And it's on my website, but I resonated with the statue of a grieving parent, and the whole center of the statue was just gone. Like the whole heart of a grieving parent is just gone. And that's how I felt my whole life. But I reject myself so profoundly, there's nothing left to connect with, which is why I had so many failed relationships throughout my whole life, because I was failing at the relationship with myself. So the universe is a mirror showing me that in all of my failed relationships. And I had to fix the relationship with myself before I'd be able to fix my relationship with other people. So I would say that, kind of trying to get back to your question there. I got off on a tangent. No, I got away from your question. Can you ask your question again? I can get back to that.
Yeah, we were just talking about pain and how that experience of pain revealed things to you that maybe you weren't aware of before, in terms of feminine identity, your voice or lineage.
Yeah, so I'm learning how to transform my emotional wounds into personal wisdom helped me understand this piece of wisdom, that even the box of emotional darkness he left me with was a gift. And that, if life is like jumping on a trampoline, the deeper you go, the higher you fly. So it was hard for me to accept, why did I need so much emotional pain to see and understand myself? I'm like, oh, well, and all based on the laws of physics. So once I accept, oh, physicists have proven that we all have energy bodies, we all have souls, and this is how it operates. I'm like, oh, now I can rely on the laws of physics to understand why my life is planned this way. Like, why do I need so many hills and valleys in my life? But that's how energy fluctuates and moves, right? And moving energy is alive energy. So once I learned, oh, I need the capacity to go into my fear, guilt, and shame. And then that catapults me up to my next, piece of wisdom. And that is life. It's not getting rid of the fear, guilt, and shame, which I hated because I spent so much time in my fear, guilt, and shame with my 35 years of debilitating lower back pain. But just coming to understand how energy moves and why it needs to move and why we need the fear, guilt, and shame. And I was like, oh, okay, well, life is like jumping on a trampoline. If I want Mount Everest sized wisdom, I got to take on Mount Everest sized wounds. Like if you're jumping on a trampoline, you go a little bit high. But if you go super deep, that'll throw you up super high in enlightenment and emotion. So I had to learn, oh, okay. So we took on as, personally and then as a collective, planning this to go to kind of thrust us down to our fear, guilt, and shame to expand our emotional range because we have to explore our depths before we explore our heights. So this whole what we've experienced, all this mental illness that I've seen, especially gotten bad over the past 20 years, is that's a lot of fear, guilt, and shame unprocessed. But we needed that personally and as a collective so that we could all expand our emotional range up to and including enlightenment. So then once I saw that, I was like, okay, fine, be that way. Okay, fine.
I like that example, the metaphor that you gave. I personally resonate really well with metaphorical concepts, and that was a really beautiful way of describing healing and how it actually works, right? It's not all the fun stuff. It's all the stuff you don't even want to look at, much less touch, much less embody. No, thank you. But that's part of the work, part of how it goes. If you want to expand, then you've got to move into those places of contraction and you've got to expand from there. So thank you for putting those words on that. That was really beautifully stated. How would you describe shamanic perception to someone who's never heard of that before?
So, shamanic perception, I would say that I'm going to just take it down to the basics. It's acknowledging that we're souls having an earth experience. And I'll quote Einstein: the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field meaning the energy field, the soul. And so physicists have proven that we're all souls and that we all communicate through our heart spaces. And that's going to include all the animals, the buffalo, all the keystone species, the salmon, like salmon are keystone species. I learned that. I was like, that's so cool. The otters, like everything that when we don't see ourselves as in relationship with other people and other animals, and we see it as a hierarchy, then we have an external locus of control, and that sets us up for failure. But when we acknowledge, okay, I'm a soul having a human experience, so are all these other animals, so are all these other people, and that we're all connected through our hearts, now how am I going to relate? And I would say that is what I'm going to call shamanic. It is that kind of more indigenous wisdom about being in relationship with and not dominance over. Christianity, a lot of forms of Christianity teach that God gave men dominion over land and animals. And I'm going to call that the feminine. But what happened with like manifest destiny? We killed 60 million buffalo. We killed all the keystone species, destroying our ability to have ecological revival and stop, like beavers stop flooding and wildfires and drought and and restore the water. But when we had this, external locus of the control, God told us to do it, this hierarchy, then we, can make a lot of missteps. Now, yes, we need hierarchy in some forms, but when we talk about relationships, being a relationship with ourselves, a relationship with nature, I think this is where the shamanic, more indigenous relational ways of interacting we can learn a lot from. And there's been a lot of work done, especially in the past 10, 20 years. Like 100 years ago, we had 1,000 buffalo, and now we have 500,000. The beavers are coming back. The salmon is coming back. They're taking down dams. So this kind of awareness is coming out of the collective, out of our souls, and is being, manifested and implemented successfully. And it's really exciting for me to see that. I love that.
And from your own experience, what does mysticism feel like in the body?
I would say like it feels like higher vibrating. So when, that I feel my emotions. So is acknowledging the importance of the feminine. And so my ex-husband's Israeli. So I could talk about Judaism, and I've lived in Israel. And so and my legal name is Buzaglo. Buzaglo is a Sephardic Jewish name, meaning that when the Jews were exiled from Spain in 1492, they took on this last name, meaning exiled and humiliated. Many went to Morocco, some went to Israel, and then some went to the Far East. And they had interacted a lot with the Cathars in southern France that had pulled out the more of the feminine wisdom, the feminine mysticism that wasn't in the Christian church, that wasn't in Judaism, because Judaism, the rabbinic Jews, they go for more like the hierarchy. There's one male Messiah coming. But in mystical Judaism, it's the feminine in counterbalance to the masculine, and they're coming back together. So it's a whole other way of looking at it. So when you get into the more mysticism, or even early Christianity also acknowledges the feminine. But when you get into more mainstream Christianity, like mainstream Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, the feminine is super repressed and the masculine is in my opinion overexpressed, and that's where we get the imbalance, that's where we get the patriarchy. But the more that women, it's up to us women to embrace our femininity. And I'm not out here to compete with any man. Like I can't compete physically with a man, but I'm out here to express my own femininity, because I know that when I express my own femininity, that's what drives healthy masculinity. And when we took women out of the home, out of the center of the home, and put them in the workplace and told them to act like men, and we lost femininity, that's where we lost mental health, because emotional intimacy is where mental health is created and sustained. And no center of the home, no emotional intimacy, no mysticism, no femininity, and we've lost ourselves. So it's just time for the return of that. But I see that returning in a lot of ways. Like last year was the first time in America where white non-Latino women started giving birth more. Like we were been a downturn for 30 years, and last year it started going up in terms of births. Well, that's giving birth, creation, that's women being healthy with their wombs. And so I'm excited for that change, because that wasn't the way it was when I was a kid. Like that was never discussed. How to be a healthy feminine woman, how to be a healthy mother. That was never discussed in high school. And it was just all get a degree, get a job. And that's really hurt us, I think.
It's an important bridge for listeners because often these experiences are described conceptually, but they're actually deeper somatic patterns. People feel them in their breath, their body, their awareness. Let's bring in that neuroscience layer. What do you believe is happening in the brain during moments of expanded awareness or spiritual experience?
So I'm going to stay with Einstein's "the field is the sole governing agency of the particle." And this is my first enlightenment experience. Is that things have to happen in the 3D before they can be grounded in the 5D before they can be grounded in the 3D. Right. So when I have a lot of fear, guilt, and shame in my soul, and I haven't processed it through, then that's communicated out through my heart, and the nervous system in my heart communicates that to my brain, and our heart send far more signals to our brains than the other way around. So if my heart is constantly communicating fear, fear, fear to my brain, and my brain is over releasing cortisol, well, what happens then? When I have too much cortisol in my blood over an extended period of time, that drives inflammation, which is the main driver of illness. I mean, the field of epigenetics has proven that less than 1% of our diseases come from our genetics. So, where's it coming from? Our fear, guilt, and shame. And what cancer and viruses and bacteria all vibrate below 100 hertz. I mean, I'm not a scientist, it's just in the research I've done. I haven't gotten sick in 6, 7 years because I vibrate so high. So, this is the benefit of your soul having a plan for you to vibrate higher, and giving yourself permission to do this emotional work. But it takes the surrender, it takes the relaxation. So this is what I had to learn, is that the surrender is the feminine. Like the woman, women used to drop their handkerchief in front of a man and he would decide what to do. Well, that's healthy, feminine, masculine. Whether we like it or not is beyond the point, right? But the surrender, when we like surrender to our fear, guilt, and shame, there's the feminine. Go into your deeper, denser, darker emotions. That's what they call it, the dark, the mystical, the kind of the shadow work. But self-reflection is feminine. And women were designed for that deeper emotional work, because as women, we experience 50% more negative emotions than men. We produce 50% less serotonin than men because we are physiologically designed for that emotional work. Our nervous system is far more robust than men's nervous system, so that we can go into those deeper, darker emotions on our own, mirror that for our family, teach our family how to do it so that our whole family is mentally healthy. But when women aren't given space to do that, like, how do I have time for that when I'm working 40 hours a week, divorced, got 3 kids? Like, I don't have time for that. So then my family doesn't know how to process their emotions, and then there's the problem. So I would say, like, that is the benefit of acknowledging that this work currently isn't getting done in mass in American culture, and how do we women to do this work that they are naturally physiologically designed to work for. Like my dedication in my book, the Cherokee proverb, it says a woman's highest calling is to connect a man to his soul so he can unite with source. Man's highest calling is to protect a woman so she can walk the earth unharmed. That's the woman doing the inside work, the center work, and then the man occupies the periphery, the outside work. And that's basically what we're designed for. But I know that, over the past 50 years, 100 years, we've really challenged those conceptions, those traditional conceptions of womanhood and manhood.
How did your perception of reality shift as your awareness changed?
Well, I finally understood how reality is created, that we live in a holographic universe. And so once I acknowledged that, then Carl Jung helped me a lot too, because he does so much work on projection, that I attract people into my life to see myself, and that they're not doing anything wrong when I get triggered, and that my triggers are my healing friend and not my healing foe. Right? Like there's so much kind of communication in society that when, like, if I get triggered by someone, it's the other person's fault. But I had to learn that that's codependent thinking, that that's not true. When I get triggered, that is my soul bringing my emotional pain to the surface so that I can transform it from emotional wound to emotional wisdom. And then, excuse me, in general, I vibrate higher. And that's when I spend more time in those higher vibrating emotions like courage, joy, love, enlightenment. Enlightenment being 700 to 1,000 hertz. Then I want to spend the majority of my time up there. Then I'm not getting sick because I'm not spending the majority of my time at 100 hertz and below. And so that was a huge lesson I had to learn, but I had to see that over time, and just slowly but surely, like, oh, I'm not getting sick anymore. Oh, I'm not in my fear. I don't have lower back pain anymore. Like it was just a kind of, slowly but surely process, and then kind of getting out of being triggered all the time, and then giving myself space to go, oh, what's the sequence of events here? Oh, and just slow down and slowly get more patience with myself. And it's been a slow process. I'm almost at 11 years. But that it takes time, especially for women. It takes us more time to move into our emotions and out of our emotions.
What helped you stabilize those experiences so they could be integrated rather than overwhelming you?
I gave myself space, a lot of alone time. And because the first time I experienced enlightenment, it was huge. It was super overwhelming. And my family freaked out because we didn't know. And I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies. I've lived in Chinese Buddhist monasteries, but no one ever taught me that enlightenment is an emotion. Now, I'm not saying they didn't know. I'm saying I was never taught. So I didn't, when it happened the first time, it lasted 3 days, and the fears, the catastrophic fears that I was shown were just so gnarly. I even called the police at my ex-husband's house. Like, that's how like in it I was. It took me about 6 weeks to ground back into myself in a healthy way where I could even start interacting with other people. But that was just the first time. Once I learned, oh, this is how it works, I'm going to see wisdom, I'm going to face fears, and then I'm going to integrate. And then I kind of understood that process, and I used one of my teachings in my free ebook, Appreciate, Learn, Forgive. Appreciate your challenges. How do you integrate after an enlightenment experience, right? Learn my lessons through self-reflection, which all of those fears and gave me a ton of self-reflection. And then forgiveness is the integration work. But I just moved through my processes, and now I'm in and out of enlightenment a couple times a week because I know how to surf that huge enlightenment wave.
From a neurointegrative perspective, expansion without grounding can feel destabilizing. So, integration becomes just as important as having those experiences as well. Let's talk a little bit about the return because awakening is part of the process, but living it is another. And you talked a little bit about that a moment ago. How did embodiment become part of your integration?
Yeah, so the first time it happened, I was in great shape. I was going to hot yoga 5, 6 times a week, but I was vibrating so high at 700 to 1,000 hertz, I lost 12 pounds. So that's one reason my kids were like really worried. They had reason to worry about me. It was really gnarly. So, but then I gave myself permission to rest and surrender to what I had been shown, and then slowly but surely process those wounds into wisdom. I did 2 medicine journeys. And what I accepted during the medicine journeys is that guy who I was talking to at that point was a retired fire captain who oversees the Wildland Cadet program. So he's a very, high level guy, but he's also married. And all the men that I attracted into my life, we call them players, they had multiple women. Why did I attract men with multiple women into my life? Well, I had a wound that I'm replaceable. So that's one way my soul found to show me that wound, that I'm replaceable. But also, the universe is a mirror. This man's married and having marriage challenges. Okay, what marriage challenges have I not processed? And that's what I didn't want to accept. But what those medicine journeys really opened me up in a huge way, the psilocybin and the magic mushrooms. And I was really able to use it as a mirror moment and help me kind of open up the wound from my marriage, where my inability to stay in my feminine lane and be compassionate and nurturing and forgiving and understanding, and that I didn't know how to do. It's like, okay, Carrie, process that pain through, and forgive yourself for not knowing those things. And now it's time to learn those things. I would say that's kind of how I did it. I really gave myself a lot of space and permission that this is going to take a lot of time, and I'm going to need multiple avenues for help. And I walk barefoot in nature and yoga and meditation. And so I use a lot of different techniques to integrate. But I'd say the biggest one is just giving myself space for it takes what it friggin' takes, and not to judge myself that it's taking so long, which is really hard.
What does self love look like for you, the daily practice?
First, I listen to my inner guidance. My intuition tells me what to do every day. So I don't overwhelm myself by like going, oh, my intuition didn't tell me, but my brain's going to like override my soul and just go straight to my brain to make decisions. I don't do that anymore. So I really I'm really good. I completely focused on inner guidance, that my soul has a plan. My soul was born of the quantum field. So it houses all the wisdom and knowledge in the universe and knows exactly what I need to do. And the more and more I do that, the more and more I'm in alignment and things just line up. Like this week on Monday, I signed with someone to help me launch my podcast. and I'm also selling my condo. So lined up like the next day, they came and staged my house. So now I have a great office until I sell my condo, which should happen quickly. So it's like things like that that I know that when I listen to myself and I stay on my in my soul's plan, that I'm completely in alignment. So that I always say is where it starts is that inner love, is that inner kind of the inner authority and really trusting myself. But also, I drink a lot of water. I a healthy diet. I walk barefoot in nature. I'm a Reiki master. I'm also a Karuna Reiki master. So I've done a lot of personal work on myself, but that personal work, like those Reiki weekends, I cried a lot and I released a lot. It was all about healing myself first because when we put self-love first, and people say, well, isn't self-love selfish? I'm like, well, not when it's true self-love, because if I consider that I have a cup of love in my heart, and if I don't fill that cup of love and have overflow, then I'm pouring from lack. I'm pouring from my fear, guilt, and shame. And then that doesn't help me, and it doesn't help other people. But when I fill up my own cup of love with a healthy diet, healthy amounts of rest, healthy amounts of exercise, healthy amounts of self care, I listen to my own inner authority and I create an overflow. Then I pour from the overflow. Now we're talking. Now, and then they're going to get the best parts of me with the healthy boundaries and the rest itself. And I'm not yelling at people. And I know how to process my emotions. And I'm not codependent. And I'm not anxious all the time. I'm not taking my crap out on people all the time. And that's really the process of what I had to learn how to do, is to fill up my own cup so much that I have overflow, and to learn how to pour from the overflow.
I see often is that healing is not about leaving the human experience. It's about learning how to be in it differently with more awareness, more compassion, more connection. We always like to end our conversations with what we call a micro practice invitation, not a big protocol or perfection, just a small, meaningful practice that listeners can explore every day over the next week. Kerry, what's a gentle practice you would like to invite our listeners into?
Find 3 things to be grateful for every day: your house, water, your clothes, your family, your job, the birds outside, whatever it is, whatever you love. Find 3 things and start there. Start finding gratitude, and then you can expand from there.
I don't mean to be funny, but in my darkest moments, sometimes the first thing I think of is toilet paper. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like sometimes life can be rough and it's like we have to find something. And it's like, well, I'm really glad I don't have to use my hand. And
Yes,
I just want to say that's enough, you guys. Okay, don't put
everyone
this
knows, right?
expectation. Yes, everybody poops. So don't put this expectation that it's supposed to be some grandiose thing that you're grateful for. Like, don't have those expectations. Like, find something tangible, something right now. Before we close, one final question for you, Kerry. If someone is out there today and they're listening in a place of pain or uncertainty, what do you most hope that they'll remember about themselves as they walk away from our conversation today?
That they're a soul having an earth experience. That we come here to face challenges, to expand ourselves. That life is not supposed to be easy or comfortable. We come here for the discomfort, because if things aren't comfortable, why change? And I'll leave it with a piece of wisdom that I learned from my lower back pain. Pain is beautiful because it reveals what longs to be healed.
Kerry, thank you for this conversation, for your honesty, your depth, and the way you speak to both human and expanded aspects of healing. To everyone listening, if something opened inside of you today, please move gently with yourself. Remember that healing isn't in a straight line, okay? It's a remembering. You can learn more about Kerry. I'll have those links ready for you in the show notes, so just hop over there and you will find them there. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it with your people. Subscribe to our podcast. That's how these conversations reach the people who need to hear them the most. Again, I'm Dr. Sarah Young, and this is Neuroalchemy. Until next time, remember this: you are not broken. You are becoming. Bye for now.